Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the press conference on the 100 days of the von der Leyen Commission. President, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning to all of you. The College of Commissioners has taken office now since 100 days. And while we were preparing this meeting here this morning, I thought about the situation, how it was 100 days ago. And it's worth to look back, because then you might remember the topics were 1 month's delay, will there be a majority for the college, will there be a UK commissioner was still the question, climate neutrality 2050, isn't that completely over-ambitious, and Council will never agree to that. When I started 100 days ago, there were many, many different questions and many difficult issues on the agenda, but the EU-Turkey statement was not under question. And in all my speeches, I said that migration will stay with us, migration will not go away, and that we need to find sustainable solutions. And today we are in the middle of a deep dilemma. The events at the Greek-Turkish border clearly point to a politically motivated pressure on the EU's external border. The migrants that have been brought to the border are in a situation where they need help, and Greece needs help too. And this is one of the topics I have discussed with Prime Minister Mitsotakis over and over, and I will discuss today with President Erdogan. So not just the long-term relationship with Turkey, but also this very acute situation. Finding a solution to this situation will require relieving the pressure that is put on the border and ensuring that the individual right to ask for asylum is respected. And it will require supporting both Greece and Turkey to deal with the pressure they are under. And this is why I'm in constant contact with the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis, and I'm meeting President Erdogan tonight together with the President of the Council, Charles Michel, to discuss all these topics. On top of all this, we have a situation on the Greek islands, in the refugee camps, that was already over the limit, and now more people are arriving, and of course further support is needed. The €350 million provided by the European Union immediately are a first step to improve the situation on the islands. Another €350 million will follow. But it is urgent to relieve the pressure on the island by bringing people to the mainland of the continent too. And I think it is very urgent to care for the unattended minors on these Greek islands. I'm very concerned about their situation. They are the most vulnerable. It's urgent to get them away from the islands and to find a safer place for them. This is why last week, together with the Prime Minister Mitsotakis, I asked the Member States to help right now. Of course, there will be a long-term help needed, but to help right now with the unattended minors on the Greek islands. And thankfully, we got positive replies already, for example, from France, from Portugal, from Luxembourg, from Finland, from Germany. So they will step in the acute situation and take on unattended minors to their countries, to the Member States, but of course further help over time is needed. And humanitarian support for the refugees in Syria is needed too. As a start, the European Union immediately mobilised an additional €60 million, but more is to be done. To those who have questions over the last days, the European capacities, I say very clearly that we are much better prepared in the European Union today compared to 2015. This is why we are able to send all this help to Greece at the moment being. But we're still not prepared enough. Within these first 100 days, Vice President Skinas and Commissioner Ylva Johansson consulted all the 27 member states to find common ground for migration. And we will put forward our new European Migration Pact right after Easter. We're almost done with it now. We're going in depth now in the preliminary consultations, and then after Easter we'll put it forward. Another acute situation that we are faced with is the spread of coronavirus. We are, of course, following closely the developments in Italy with the government, where the government has announced new measures to contain the spread of the virus. We have, as you know, within the Commission, a corona response team that is working with the member states on the known issues. That is preparedness, that is risk assessment, the coordination of measures, the funding of research and on diagnostics, on treatment, on vaccines, the joint procurement, for example, for the protective gear. The spread of the virus has a vast impact on people's lives, but it also has a vast impact on our economy. We are looking into everything that we can do to help to address the impacts on the economy. And there's a strong coordination ongoing with the leaders of Europe, but also, of course, with our European institutions, for example, like the ECB or the Eurogroup, to address these topics in a coordinated and coherent way. In these difficult times, we all sense that people and member states are asking for more Europe. Do more, act more on borders, act more on migration support, on coronavirus, on the macroeconomic support. Yet without a new budget, we will not be able to respond appropriately. We are at the end of the current budget. The 7-year period is almost over. And if I look at the tasks ahead of us, we're running short of the flexibility to act in crises as we see them right now. So this is why I call urgently on all member states to find now an agreement on the MFF. We need it to proceed. It's very late already, and we really need now a common agreement on the next budget for the next 7 years. These were all unforeseen challenges that we have addressed immediately. But they have not derailed our effort to deliver on our long-term agenda for the European Union. And I remember our first days in office. At that time, there was still a lot of skepticism about the European Green Deal and the goal to be climate neutral in 2050. Today, it's no longer the question if there will be a European Green Deal or whether the European Union will become climate neutral. But the question is how. How are we proceeding? And how far-reaching will the transition be? Today, the European Green Deal is known to everybody. We're working steadily on the transition, like things as the Just Transition Mechanism or the climate law that has just been put forward, but many other steps to follow over the next weeks and months. And 100 days ago, there was, as I said initially, still the question, will we have a British commissioner, yes or no? Well, today, we know that we've signed the withdrawal agreement. 100 days later, we are rapidly and in unity have adopted a comprehensive mandate for the negotiations, and we held already the first round on the negotiations with the United Kingdom. We know what each side is standing for now, and will negotiate for now. We will accompany the implementation of the withdrawal agreement very thoroughly. This is necessary. We are ready to negotiate a very ambitious and comprehensive new partnership with the United Kingdom. We will make as much as we can, but the truth is also that our partnership will be different as it was before. And the UK will be a third country, and the European Union will continue to forge its path in today's world on its own. After 100 days in the digital area, we have paved the road already we want to take, the road we want to take for citizens, but also for business and for governments, On 5G, for example, for the very first time, the European Union has a common position on how to assess security risks and what to do about them. The Commission has presented its very first white book on artificial intelligence and the very first data strategy, because we know that Europe has a huge amount of sleeping potential, of unused data, which we can share in the European data space we want to create. And when I took office, the industry strategy was a long-standing request by the European Council. Well, tomorrow on day 101, we will present it to you. It binds together the Green Deal, the digital agenda, and the global Europe. It combines a strong single market with competition rules that are fit for the global economy. With the industry strategy, we will sharpen our defensive instruments globally, and at the same time, we will take strong action to tear down the barriers within the single market, because thus it will enable business to use the full scale of the whole single market, and at the same time, we're not naive about the global competition, and we're not naive at the sometimes unfair competition we're facing. And in day 102, so 2 days from today, we will propose a circular economy action plan. This should enable us to break away with the old model that consisted of taking too much from the environment, from the planet, from nature, to consume and then waste, throw away. But we want to go into a circular economy that is setting up a full circle of recycling, of not taking more from the planet, but giving back to the planet what we take away, in a completely new model to approach our economy. Soon after we took office, the enlargement process was in a deadlock. People in the Western Balkans were disappointed, and we were losing faith in the European Union. Now there is a new perspective, also thanks to our balanced proposal, the new methodology, which makes the enlargement process more speedy, more reliable, and more credible. And our efforts to help Albania reconstruct after the devastating earthquake have gone a long way to restore faith and to restore trust in the European Union. I'm very often asked about what does it mean to be geopolitical. Well, whatever I've explained right now means being geopolitical. And being geopolitical also means going to Africa with the largest ever delegation we ever had to a college-to-college meeting. This is a real change of mindset. We're working with Africa on a positive agenda that is looking beyond development and beyond security. We're working on climate change. We're working on environment, the digital transformation, skills and job, and many more things we've been discussing with the African Union when we was in Addis Ababa. We had Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans visiting South Africa to discuss green topics. And we have had Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager discussing the digital agenda in Nairobi. This is a new way to working with Africa. And the HRVP Joseph Borrell and Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen will present to you our new strategy with Africa in a few moments. So over the past 100 days, our direction of travel has changed fundamentally. We have spelled out a real political vision for Europe and a clear roadmap how to get there. Europe is faced with a huge transition. It's the twin transition of the digital and the green transition. And Europe needs to ensure its sovereignty in a complex and geopolitical environment. It was important to grasp the key underlying driving factors for change in order to spell out this vision for the next 30 years we do have together in Europe. We have done so. We have developed a positive agenda for Europe, being the first climate-neutral continent, first continent with a data strategy to grasp the industrial data wave, and as of tomorrow, to have a renewed industrial strategy and a real vision for Europe's economic and industrial power. This all couldn't have been done without a fantastic team of commissioners and vice presidents that are very dedicated, each and every one in their fields, in their files, and I want to thank them for their dedicated work from this point on. These 100 days were amazing with them, a great team, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Well, let's start with Sam.
Thanks. Sam Fleming from the Financial Times. You mentioned the vast impact of coronavirus that could be seen on the economy. I wondered if you could give us some more details in terms of what the Commission believes is needed now on the budgetary response on an EU-wide scale. The Eurogroup is obviously meeting next week, as is ECOFIN. How large a coordinated fiscal stimulus do you now believe is needed by member states in order to deal with what some economists are now saying is a serious risk of a recession? Thank you.
So we do have two different approaches that are possible. The one is flexibility, and the other one is money, indeed. And the Commission is in close contact, of course, with the national authorities, with the industry representatives and other stakeholders. On the macroeconomic side, I am in constant close contact with Christine Lagarde too. And indeed, we are preparing for the finance minister meeting that will take place next week to discuss the situation and the possible actions at the EU level. We're exploring all the existing possibilities for flexibilities, for example, in the Stability and Growth Pact, and what state aid is concerned for exceptional circumstances within this frame. And of course, there's a strong coordination of our answers and action at all levels, and these are not only the national levels and the EU levels, but also on the levels beyond.
Thank you. Valentina was next.
Hi, Valentina Pop from the Wall Street Journal. Hi, President, I'm here. You were saying that 100 days ago, the EU-Turkey statement was not in question. So I guess the question is the EU-Turkey statement currently in question? And what is your target for this meeting with President Erdogan? He has been calling for more money. And I realize that the EU countries are currently in negotiations on the MFF, so doubling or coming up with a new envelope for Turkey might be difficult. But is this part of your strategy to sort of hint that you might renew the EU-Turkey statement in terms of financial means? Thank you.
Well, tonight is the restart of a dialogue, the rekindle of speaking together, and this is the beginning. This is very important. This is the beginning of having the dialogue and developing, at best, a common roadmap. This is certainly will not be done today. Of course, we will speak of topics like stability in the region. And here it is for me very important that there's a clear consensus on reducing the tension and the pressure on the Greek-Turkish border. You know that there is the obligation to protect the border, there is EU law, but there's also the obligation to guarantee fundamental rights, including the right to ask for asylum. So this is in the Charter, and this is what we need as a solution in the very end, that the actual situation, the tension is reduced, the migrants get help that are at the Turkish border. But of course, the scope of the discussion tonight will be wider. It's not only stability in the region and security and migration, but of course the scope will also be on questions like, for example, Syria. And we will go through the different topics that are part of the relationship between Turkey and the European Union. So step by step, look at what the one side and the other side's point of view is. and figure out how we can move forward in a more positive way as it has been over the last week.
Thank you. Next was Jorge.
Good morning. Here, Jorge Valero with Euractiv. Also 2 questions. The first one, when you met President Trump in Davos, you promised that there will be an agreement, a deal even, in a few weeks' time between the EU and the US. So I would like to know when at least the proposal to President Trump will be ready, and therefore when you plan to travel to the United States. And secondly, you have to deal with the most fragmented parliament in the history. Also, you have to deal with big divisions between the member states, and you promise a lot of dialogue, and we've seen a lot of public consultations and the postponement of legislative proposals. So have you seen any progress in bringing together and building this unity over the past 100 days?
So your first question, what President Trump is concerned, we had a good meeting in Davos. We agreed to work on a possible trade agreement, to look into the possibilities, for example, not only in trade, but also in energy, for example, or in technologies. We have ongoing consultations, back and forth visits on both sides of the Atlantic, so I would qualify it at the moment being as work in progress. And the moment we are done, then indeed there will be a visit to the United States. But it's work in progress. Oh, and your second question, excuse me, on the Parliament. Well, there's always the notion out there that this is a fragmented Parliament. I don't see it like this. I see it as a very lively, interested Parliament with whom I think it's the typical symbol for a vivid democracy, to have these different opinions and to have a very constant dialogue with all the different groups. And as you know, I always do that whenever we have the parliamentary session in Strasbourg, or this week here in Brussels. And for me, it's enormously positive to have these different standpoints, because then you can shape your agenda. We have a strong common vision on the goals, but how to reach these goals, of course, you have to shape your agenda accordingly to what the learning effects are we are doing together on new fields, what the move towards a climate-neutral continent is concerned, or, for example, on the whole topic of the digital agenda. And for me, it's fascinating. It's very positive to have the exchange with this Parliament.
Thank you. We had a colleague on the left. Yes.
Thomas Mayer vom Standard aus Österreich. Frau Präsidentin, ich stelle meine Frage auf Deutsch, wenn ich darf. Sie haben es erwähnt, Griechenland, die Situation der vor allem Minderjährigen, der Kinder auf den Inseln. Dieses Problem ist ja nicht erst bekannt, seit die Krise an der türkisch-griechischen Grenze vergangene Woche ausgebrochen ist. Ganz im Gegenteil, seit vielen Jahren wird darauf hingewiesen, dass die griechische Regierung nicht dafür sorgt, dass die vielen 100 Millionen an Hilfsgeldern dafür verwendet werden, um ordentliche Lager zu bauen. Erlauben Sie mir eine kritische Frage zu diesen ersten 100 Tagen Ihrer Präsidentschaft. Was bedeutet das denn, wenn Ihr Land, Deutschland, heute beschließt, 1500 Kinder in einer Sofortaktion aus dieser Situation herauszubringen, aus diesen fürchterlichen Lagern, und man sozusagen bitten muss, dass auch andere Länder sich daran beteiligen? Ist das nicht ein eher sehr schlechtes Zeichen? Und dazu eine zweite Frage. Es wird viel vom Druck auf den türkischen Präsidenten Erdogan in diesem Zusammenhang gesprochen. Wann wird denn die EU-Kommission oder der Rat oder vielleicht einige Mitgliedsländer Druck auf die griechische Regierung machen, um diese Zustände endlich auch mit EU-Mitteln zu beenden? Dankeschön.
Es ist richtig, dass wir unbedingt etwas tun müssen, um den Zustand auf den griechischen Inseln zu verbessern. Und es ist richtig, dass ich mit aller Kraft gemeinsam mit dem Premierminister diese Aufgabe angegangen bin, mit dem, wie ich vorhin sagte, Blick auf die Aktualität jetzt. Jetzt muss etwas getan werden. Und der erste Blick fällt hier auf die unbegleiteten minderjährigen Kinder und Jugendlichen, die auf den Inseln sind. Deshalb habe ich letzte Woche darum gebeten, sehr pragmatisch die Mitgliedstaaten um akute Hilfe und bin sehr dankbar, dass die Reaktionen gekommen sind und weitere, da bin ich sicher, werden auch noch kommen. Aber natürlich haben Sie recht, dass wir langfristig einen Prozess auch aufbauen müssen, mit dem Blick jetzt auf die unbegleiteten Jugendlichen, dass wir systematisch und zuverlässig dafür sorgen können, dass sie ein sicheres neues Zuhause dann auch haben. Deshalb gehen wir in einen zweiten Strick in einem Prozess gemeinsam mit UNICEF, dass wir richtig strukturiert erarbeiten, wie können wir konstant dafür sorgen, dass, wenn unbegleitete Jugendliche dort in den Camps sind oder aber kommen, dass wir einen Mechanismus haben, dass wir uns um sie kümmern und dass sie eine gute und dauerhafte Perspektive dann auch haben können. Und das führt gleich weiter zu Ihrer zweiten Frage. Wissen Sie, die Ereignisse in der Rasanz an der türkisch-griechischen Grenze, und wir konnten ja in den ersten Tagen sehen, wie schnell auch die ungerechtfertigte Behauptung der Türkei, die europäischen Grenzen seien offen, um sich gegriffen hat zu einer Situation geführt, wo wir um jeden Preis uns mit aller Kraft bemühen müssen, dass wir wieder Ruhe und Verlässlichkeit und vor allen Dingen Hilfe für diejenigen, die dort an der türkisch-griechischen Grenze sind, bekommen. Das geht nur, indem wir mit allen Beteiligten sprechen. Das ist sowohl der griechische Ministerpräsident, und ich habe deutlich gesagt auch, dass neben der ganzen Hilfe, die die Europäische Union leistet, wir auch erwarten, dass die grundsätzlichen Rechte gewahrt und umgesetzt werden. Dazu gehört auch das Recht auf Asyl, aber selbstverständlich auch das Gespräch mit Präsident Erdogan, wo wir einerseits anerkennen, dass ja die Türkei viel leistet, indem sie für mehrere Millionen Flüchtlinge sorgt. Auch mit unserer Hilfe, aber primär die Türkei für diese Geflohenen sorgt. Aber dass wir zweitens sehr klar auch darüber reden müssen, dass das, was wir am letzten Wochenende gesehen haben, so sich nicht wiederholen darf und dass wir miteinander eine tragbare Vereinbarung entwickeln müssen, dass in Zukunft solche Eskalationen an der türkisch-griechischen Grenze vermieden werden.
Thank you very much. James will be next.
Thank you. It's James Chris from The Telegraph. Two quick questions. Do you think there will be a landing zone for the Brexit talks in 100 days' time in June without compromise on the EU mandate? And secondly, on Greece and Turkey, how much more are you willing to pay Turkey to keep migrants out of Europe?
Well, I think if I start with the second question first, I already twice now described the process that will start tonight. This is the dialogue that we are rekindling, and this covers all the topics. Also the question, how are we after the EU-Turkey agreement? Basically, the commitments are fulfilled. So either the money has been paid or it has already been contracted. That we ask ourselves how will be the next step be. But this is at the very beginning, and it's a wider scope that we have to take, including also the question how to deal with the situation in Syria and the questions I just answered before, though please take into account this is the beginning of the talks that we were starting tonight. On Brexit. Well, I think now we both have set our presented our negotiation mandate. You know that we want to be very ambitious. We want to have a very good relationship with our British friends. We are aware that there are differences in the approach towards what scope should the future agreement have and what are, if I may say so, the rules of the game. everybody has to abide to. So it will be it will be important that the United Kingdom kind of makes up its mind. The closer they want to have the access to the single market, the more, of course, they have to play by the rules that are the rules of the single market. If this is not the UK's choice, then, of course, they will be more distant and it will be more difficult for the UK to access the single market. So I think it's up to the United Kingdom within the negotiations to think about the trade-offs they want to take into account.
Thank you. Virginie is next.
Oui, bonjour, Virginie Malingue du Monde. Je voudrais revenir d'abord sur les mineurs non accompagnés. Vous avez dit que 5 pays, enfin je ne sais plus combien, plusieurs pays s'étaient d'ores et déjà engagés à en reprendre. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous en dire plus? C'est-à-dire combien de mineurs? Est-ce qu'il y a une répartition pays par pays? Enfin bon, à quel stade d'une entente avec ces pays vous en êtes? Deuxièmement, sur les discussions avec M. Erdogan, enfin vous en tout cas, est-ce que vous pensez que l'accord UE-Turquie tel qu'il a été signé en 2016, il y a des éléments qui doivent être revus? Est-ce que dans les plaintes de M. Erdogan à ce sujet, il y a des choses que vous entendez, donc vous dites oui, ça ne va pas, l'argent ne va pas assez vite, enfin j'en sais rien. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Et est-ce que vous pensez qu'à terme, il faudra effectivement lui donner plus d'argent? Est-ce que par ailleurs, vous pensez qu'il faudra mettre plus d'argent dans cet accord?
Virginie, je pense que la présidente a déjà répondu 2 fois à la question.
On ne commence pas.
Il date quand même d'il y a 4 ans. On a donc du recul sur cet accord aujourd'hui. Est-ce que dans cet accord, il y a des choses dont vous pensez que ça ne fonctionne pas bien, et Turquie évidemment, et est-ce que vous pensez qu'il a été mal dimensionné? Voilà, c'est une autre question.
On the question on the finances, I was already very clear that we are at the beginning and no numbers are being discussed at the very start, but this is something which has to be seen in the overall picture. Referring to your question, how I see the Turkish EU statement, well, I think that in general it is a good construction because it is shared responsibilities. It has a mechanism that makes clear, and this is important, that irregular migration is not something that is tolerated, but in response that humanitarian corridors, so taking Syrian refugees from Turkey to the European Union, is the way to choose. So if you look at the numbers, so we've seen that there have been tenfold more people that came from Turkey in a humanitarian corridor to the European Union than have been returned from the Greek island to Turkey. And the second point, which I think is a fair one, is the fact that the European Union supports, for example, the Syrian refugees in Turkey, where Turkey is taken care of in health matters, in education matters, in housing and other topics, as we've done. 1.7 million Syrian refugees have been supported by the European Union, by the EU-Turkey statement. So these general principles are good ones. But of course, this agreement, this statement, has been taken for a limited amount of time. So now we have to discuss a broader scope.
Unaccompanied minors. Yes.
Last week we started to call for support what the unaccompanied minors is concerned. Indeed, some member states, and I'm very grateful for that, reacted immediately. I think it's a matter of respect that they published their own numbers. So what the capacities at the moment are being considered. I'm going to be in Greece on Thursday on this matter. So by then we certainly will have a better overview also what the Greek side has to report.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Dana. David Herzenhorn with Politico. President von der Leyen, on coronavirus, we've seen very different responses by member states, including some limits on solidarity with Italy's request through the civil protection mechanism, some member states banning the export of protective equipment. And this seems not because there are different facts on the ground, but despite different facts on the ground showing needs are greater in some parts of the EU than others. Does the EU have sufficient authority to address this crisis? Are there additional authorities needed? And then more broadly, on your first 100 days, on health issues or migration or virtually any other issue, are you observing that the mechanisms, the levers that the EU has to address crises are sufficient, that you have sufficient cooperation from the capitals? You mentioned your frustration with the MFF, or do you see areas for improvement in how crises are addressed and how decisions are taken in the EU?
First of all, it was very good to set up the Corona crisis response team in the Commission, because as we saw in the speed in which the situation progressed, it was necessary to address many different work strands. And from the Commissioner for the Economy, Paolo Gentiloni, to the Commissioner for Health and many others, Stella Kyriakides, it was necessary to have this coherent and comprehensive approach. We meet once a week in this setting under my leadership, to have the full overview about what the focus at the moment is and where we have to act or react faster. What cooperation between member states is concerned, I want to thank the member states and the Commissioner for the speed at which they found a regular mechanism to meet and to communicate. But, of course, this was necessary because, indeed, at the very beginning, it was rather bumpy. Therefore, now I see with a lot of satisfaction that there are well-established procedures, there's a clear communication, there's a clear overview about the different measures that have to be taken. Not every decision in every member state is an identical one, without any question. But the coordination and the communication between the 27 member states themselves with the Commission is working smoothly now and very efficient. If you ask for the next time or for the crisis mechanisms, well, it's always difficult to predict what the next crisis we will be in. As I said initially, 2015, migration, and today, no comparison. We've learned a lot, we've improved a lot, but we haven't gone the whole way. We still need the migration pact, so without any question. But we would never, ever have been able to react that fast in Greece if there wouldn't have been improvements. On coronavirus, I think we have to strengthen ECDC. I'm grateful that I hear from member states that they want to strengthen ECDC too. It's necessary, obviously. This brings me back to MFF. It needs to be visible in the MFF. But there are other crises that will come, but we do not know of at the moment being what kind of crisis this will be. And therefore, in general, I see it as a task for us, the Commission, to always be ready to answer with well-established patterns on crises. Corona is a typical example where we were able to do that. We took patterns that were in place for other crises, put them together and moved forward. So we will not know what the next crisis will look like.
Thank you. Sorry, Griselda was next.
Griselda Pastor de la radio española SER. Merci. J'ai bien entendu que vous appelez au retour de droit d'asile en Grèce, mais je ne sais pas si vous êtes prête à faire quelque chose pour que ça devienne une réalité si rien ne change. Je comprends bien que la situation est très complexe, mais jamais comme la semaine dernière, il y avait un sentiment si large que les droits fondamentaux, à travers le droit d'asile, étaient subsidiaires à la sécurité. Et j'aimerais savoir si vous ne craignez pas qu'une exception faite une fois, ça puisse devenir une norme à niveau européen. Et surtout, j'aimerais savoir pourquoi la réaction de la Commission n'a jamais été visée sur les droits fondamentaux avant tout, étant donné que vous êtes aussi la gardienne du traité.
Yes. Once again, I want to emphasize that European borders must be protected. Yes, this is European law, as I said, and fundamental rights must be protected and respected. This is in the Charter of the European Union, and both has to go hand in hand. And this is the reason why tonight there is the meeting with President Erdogan. This is the reason why I've been in constant contact with Prime Minister Mitsotakis. This is the reason why we try hard to reduce the tension and to mitigate the difficulties that we have at the moment, being to have progress, to find a solution that brings us back to a situation as we want.
Thank you. Next was Georgi.
Thanks. It's a follow-up to Griselda's question. I still don't get it. Does Greece, according to the Commission, needs to grant asylum to those people we see on TV footage at the border? Yes or no? And, okay, if the answer is yes, is it easy? Yes. I mean, Germany has said it closes its borders. Austria said it closes its borders. Hungary said it closes its borders. Why should Greece open its borders?
It was first of all, to answer your first question and then your second question. So the right to ask for asylum is a fundamental right, and it has to be respected. So then the second point is, it was the Turkish president who said the European borders are open. They are not open. They were not open, and they are not open. And therefore, we have to start to talk between the conflicting parties to find a solution that what we saw over the last weekend, will not happen again. We are already progressing, but we're not at the point where we want to be.
Thank you very much. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Maria García Zornoza, Europa. Back in 2015, as a Minister of Defense, you criticized Hungary for using tear gas against asylum seekers. You said, and I quote, "This is not acceptable and it is against European rules." So now I'm asking, is it legal and acceptable, the use of tear gas by Greece and the shots of rubber bullets against asylum seekers?
As a principle, all responses must be proportionate. Alleged violence incidences need to be investigated, and excessive use of force is unacceptable. This is a standing principle.
Thank you very much. The colleague in front. Yes, thank you.
Laura Coston from the German television ARD. I have also a question on the meeting today with President Erdogan, and I would like to ask my question in German. Was sind die konkreten Forderungen, die Präsident Erdogan heute beim Treffen auf den Tisch legen wird?
Mit welchen konkreten Forderungen Präsident Erdogan kommt, das wissen wir natürlich noch nicht. Wichtig ist, dass wir heute Abend den Dialog wieder starten. Die Vorkommnisse an der türkisch-griechischen Grenze waren unerträglich und dürfen sich nicht wiederholen. Und deshalb ist es umso wichtiger, das Gespräch aufzunehmen, alle Seiten zu hören, alle unterschiedlichen Standpunkte. Wir haben sicherlich Differenzen, alle unterschiedlichen Standpunkte auch zu hören und gemeinsam zu besprechen. Und das ist der Beginn heute Abend, wie wir mit der Frage auch der vielen Flüchtlinge in der Türkei und der Unterstützung der Türkei für die Arbeit, die sie tut, auch voranschreiten können. Dies beginnt heute Abend. Das wird sicherlich nicht heute Abend abgeschlossen sein, sondern da werden noch erhebliche Gespräche auch in den nächsten Tagen und Wochen stattfinden.
Thank you very much. We are going to take the last question, and it's going to go there.
Good morning. Matthew Newman from MLEX. President, I was intrigued by your comments about the EU no longer being naive when looking at the global competition, and I understand that part of the industrial policy will be about reciprocity. Just wanted to ask if you can give a little bit of more details about how you might enforce that if a country is not playing by fair rules in terms of public procurement. And then on just going back to your home nation, in Lufthansa is suffering, like many airlines, from a drop in demand from the coronavirus, and they look to be asking for government aid to help the workers who are staying at home and help pay for that. Would that be what you were just mentioning before about exceptional circumstances regarding state aid? Is that a good example of how you might think that the Commission should react?
Speak for a single example because this is to look at what are exceptional circumstances is a process that has to be done and not at first-hand view. But what you're referring to is Kurzarbeitergeld. So this is something which has been used by Germany very successfully during the last financial crisis. The principle is that the workers are, or the employees are kept in the company even if there's not enough work to do, have additional training, and the company doesn't have to pay the whole salary, but the unemployment insurance does provide the necessary, or fill the necessary gap to have a whole salary, which has as a positive effect that the employees stay in the company, the knowledge is kept and improved in the company. The moment the market is picking up again, there are capacities to answer the needs of the market, and the employees have a stable income, so the consumer at home is kept up too. Same goes for pension payments and the insurance payments that are ongoing. So this is a principle that has helped a lot. What the general state aid is concerned, there indeed we will use all the necessary and possible flexibilities for these exceptional circumstances. At the moment being, we are coordinating among the European institutions to define then very clearly and very precise what it works for. What the industry strategy is concerned, indeed, you're right that we have to fight for a level playing field around the world. And indeed, this is one of the issues that is being tackled in the industry strategy that will be presented tomorrow, to look into the foreign subsidies, indeed the lack of reciprocity on public procurement, or the potential race to the bottom on standards. So the basic principle on reciprocity is, if we allow others to compete here on our market, of course we expect that the reciprocity is given, that our companies can of course compete, for example, for public tenders in the other country too. Otherwise we have to take measures.
Thank you very much. You may wish to stay for the press conference on Africa, which will start in a few minutes. Thank you very much again.